Good evening, everyone. The time is 7:05 p.m. on Monday, June 7th, 2021. I'd like to call this Heritage Advisory Committee meeting to order. Item number 1, procedural note on the agenda. This meeting is being held electronically as per section 19(1) of the town's procedural bylaw number 6228-19 as amended due to the COVID-19 situation. Moving on to agenda item number 2, approval of the agenda. May I please have a motion to approve the revised agenda as circulated by Legislative Services?
I give a motion. John Green.
Moved by John, seconded by Bob. Thank you. Any questions or comments on the current agenda? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Thank you. Agenda item number 3, declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest this evening? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you. So we'll move on to number 4, receipt of the minutes. May I please have a motion to receive the meeting minutes of April 5th, 2021? Thank you, Neil. Moved by Neil, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments on the minutes that were circulated? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands or any questions come up, so I will call a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 5, delegations. We have one delegation this evening. Delegation 5.1 is Delegation 5.1 is Frank Pignataro, member of the Town Park Area Residents Ratepayers Association. Item 6.4, memorandum from planner. We request to remove 2632 and 3438 Birdsey from the Aurora Register of Properties of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest. Can I just confirm that Mr. Pignataro has joined the call?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for allowing me to speak here.
Excellent. Please state your name and be reminded that you have 5 minutes for your delegation.
I do. Thank you very much. My name is Frank Pignataro. Can I speak now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, dear Heritage Committee members, thank you for allowing me to share my concerns. My name is Frank Pignataro, and with my wife Donna have lived at 35 Larmont Street for 38 wonderful years and have raised our family. The main objective is to ask for the Heritage Committee's support in preventing the removal of the 2 original Sisman Shoe Company buildings on Birdsey Street from the Aurora Registers of Property of Cultural Heritage and Interest. Currently, these structures are registered and are subject to protection and preservation from removal or demolition. My goal is to show these 2 buildings have a rich historical heritage and that the Heritage Committee will report back to Council tomorrow night and say not to remove the designation, but to keep and protect these Canadian landmarks from demolition. The 2 official buildings, 34 Birdsey and 38 Birdsey, were formerly part of Sisman Shoes Company, Aurora's largest employees. This comes from tomorrow night's meeting, which they agreed to. The question to this committee is, why would Aurora Council, Town Council, want to remove a clause that protects such a historical building? This historical important building employed hundreds of residents from Aurora and Newmarket over the many years. During the challenging time, Sisman made and provided safety footwear for our Canadian military during their war efforts. Protective footwear manufactured for the Ontario Provincial Police. Of greater significance is the Sisman Shoes Company contribution to the livelihood and financial stability of many Aurora families. They were a community-minded company who supported local sports teams, charitable programs, and our local economy. This landmark cornerstone had contributed to Aurora being a wonderful community which many people have called home. It is a shame to consider the Library Square to be Sisman Square when our town is considering destroying its original building. For all who have an affiliation to the company, we are here to advocate for the preservation of Aurora's history. To demolish a piece of Aurora's legacy and replace it with a plaque simply does not show respect to a pioneer building and company. When future generations ask about the community of Aurora's contribution to the war efforts or the betterment of its citizens, it would be meaningful to be able to look at the original building, stand next to it, and reflect upon its rich history. Let us be reminded of the sacrifices made of Aurora's young men experienced to serve and protect our freedom. When we hear veterans say, "We put boots on the ground," it would be an honor to reply, "These boots were made here at Sisman Shoes Original Company." The veterans, senior Aurora residents created a past so we can have a future for our next generation. Our current quality of life, as we know it, is at risk of losing a community historical integrity. To eradicate over 100 years of historical evidence that took place at Sisman Shoes Company would be an insult to our veterans, our farmers, our factory workers, who are likely outfitted with the safety shoes made right here in Aurora. In speaking to other residents, this initiative to remove the designation coincides with the pending Metrolinx expansion and the multi-density plan. This is not the time or the place for this discussion. The Sisman Shoe Building are subject to protection, where the owner is required to provide 60-day notice in writing to the town to demolish or remove any buildings. This has not occurred, yet the proposed drawings and development plans do not show the present protected Sisman Shoes Company buildings. I believe the town has predetermined that these buildings are not historical value and will be demolished without consideration to due process. I hope the support with the Heritage Committee, you'll recommend not to remove the Sisman Shoe Company from Aurora registers of property and cultural heritage or interest, and that we can postpone any development application until an independent heritage importance study is complete. Confusion whether that both one or the original buildings is unclear. I believe both are original buildings. The larger one had its third floor removed along with half of the one side. The stucco side is hiding the original brick from the tannery foundation built here in Aurora. In closing, I'd like to thank this committee for listening and hope you consider not removing designation and ask for an independent study to determine the historical contribution to Aurora's rich heritage legacy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Pignataro. May I have a motion to receive and refer? May I have a motion to receive and refer the comments of the delegation to item 6.4?
John Green.
Thank you, John. Is someone second that?
Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Do we have any questions or comments for the delegate? And please be reminded that we will have time to discuss this matter and the recommendation from town staff during matters for consideration.
Yes, I have
Thank
a
you.
question.
Yes,
John
sir.
Green.
Please
Frank,
go ahead, John.
Frank, how would you like to see the building preserved if indeed it was declared that it was not to be removed? How would you like to see the building used now?
Okay, I love that question. The town can reply by either purchasing some of it, refabricating some of it, or even demolishing some of it. And I want to say, I'm here to listen to, yes, there's going to be something back there. I just don't want the two buildings totally demolished without some keeping of what was there. And it's the main objectives is to preserve some history there. What would be great, we talk about a landscape where people can walk through, where we can even convert those back buildings into apartments or into storefronts. Yes, there's many opportunities. Build on top, remove some of it. I have no problem with that. But to totally demolish and remove and create these giant would be, again, not purposeful for anybody. Keeping the smaller one is, again, it's the original. That's where they did manufacture. I did my research, and I do have evidence that that smaller building was used for the original. The windows were large, and the pictures from Aurora Town booklet that I have has the original building with the lights there. Historical museum. It was steam engine. There was a water tower back there, which to run the machinery for such a large factory, they created steam. Again, these are historical points that would be great to share with our young people. The veteran perspective is a war memorial. Boots that were made there were left in foreign lands from our young men and women. Boots that were made here brought our young men back. And I think just saying that is chills down my spine to think we did this in Aurora. All across Canada, boots were made here in Aurora to take overseas. And unfortunately, some of our young men didn't make it. Others did come back with those shoes and boots. A war memorial, we can use it for the town senior center. Like there's many little ideas that would support the traffic. Bursey Street will one day be cut off because of the underpass going under the train. This would be a great parkette, a great a learning center for kids, families, as well as the multi-density. I have no problem with the multi-density. We do need it. Metrolinx will be providing us with almost 10 million more commuters going through the train system. We know that. We know our population will grow. We need to preserve some of the historical ones that will be gone. Once these buildings are gone, that's it. We can do that multi-density other places, okay. Or even there, like we can reorganize some of the plans to incorporate what's there presently. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for the delegate this evening? Go ahead, Neil.
Okay, Mr. Pignataro.
Yes,
Hi.
sir.
Hi. I think you've already answered my question, but maybe not in the way I'm going to frame it. But
Yes.
It sounds like you do support a development on the site.
Yes.
And it sounds like you would definitely support integrating the both buildings or potentially one of the buildings into this into a development, a density project.
Yes.
Is that correct?
I personally would. I can't speak on behalf of other people, but I understand the downloading from our provincial government to increase our population ability. I do agree with that. My perfect day would be to leave both buildings or part of both buildings and incorporate the dwellings around this. It talks about landscapes, buildingscapes, parkettes, walking through. Again, these can all be incorporated into beside the two buildings. Yes, I would be like, again, I don't want to say, I don't want the buildings demolished, step number one. If they do, parts of it is acceptable, but not everything, no.
Okay, I just, and you want us to reconsider removing the listing status and moving towards designating it, if I'm
correct. Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And I just wonder, the first attachment on our agenda on this item, I don't have the agenda. It's item, what is it? 6.3, 6.4. It does talk about how the committee did meet a year ago, and we did an impact assessment on 34 and 38, which are the Sisman buildings, and some of the houses alongside of that, just north. So I wondered if you were aware of that we've gone through. So we did in fact do that, and we did go through an impact assessment process as we do on this committee. It's a working group.
Just to clarify that, will the underpass happen, and will Bursey Street eventually be blocked off?
That is not the purview of this committee. This committee only looks at buildings and assesses their status.
Okay.
Heritage. From what I know, which I guess a little bit of reading and maybe a little bit of hearsay,
yes.
There will be an impact, an underpass. And looking at the site plan for the proposal on this property, specifically, it looks like there is a link to Wellington that actually curves through the northernmost property there. But I won't speak to that. I won't be held to.
Can you speak? Sorry. Do you mind speaking to The original building, I have pictures from my backyard that the original building was 3 stories and was cut down to 2 stories. There was a smokestack beside the original building when we moved to Aurora. The confusion why I'd like this study to happen, independent, is I believe that this is the original building, that the top was removed, the side was removed, new windows were replaced, and that's the facts I hear. But other people are unable to give me a straight answer to say this is the original building. Because
I think it is the original building for Sisman, but I think what you're thinking of is the 3-story building is on the opposite corner, was on the opposite corner where Attridge is now. And so that building is long since gone.
Okay.
But anyway, I think I'm going to conclude here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your
discussion. Anybody else have any comments or questions for the delegate this evening?
Hi, sorry, it's Neil Phillips speaking. I had some connection issues at the start, but I'm here from ERA Architecture, and we have a small presentation prepared for this agenda.
Yep. So Neil, right now we're hearing from our delegates this evening.
Okay.
And when we do move to that item number, which will be very shortly, we will have you comment and provide your presentation to us.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. So does anyone from the Heritage Advisory Committee have any questions for Mr. Pignataro this evening? Any additional questions? Okay. I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Mr. Pignataro, for attending the meeting this evening.
Thank you.
If no more questions or concerns, I'll call a vote on the matter to receive these comments and move to the next item. All in favor? Okay. Any opposed? I'm not seeing any. Thank you. So as we had discussed earlier, we did receive a revised agenda with the order of the agenda items being switched up a little bit to accommodate the number of items this evening. And Linda and Carlson had circulated that. So what I'm going to ask for, and I'll read out the revision to the agenda, and then I'll ask for a motion to revise the agenda and someone to second it. Essentially what we're doing, since we just discussed those properties, is we'll move item 6.4 up first under matters for consideration, followed by 6.5, which is 103 Mosley, then move to 6.6 on 28 Wellington Street, and then 6.2, which would be 20 Spruce, 6.3, 63 Catherine, 6.1, the mural, and then 7.1, the Shining Hill subdivision. Does anyone have any concerns with us moving the agenda items to that order under matters for consideration? Okay, I'm not seeing any. And so what I'll do is I'll ask for a motion to revise the agenda based on what I've just outlined. Thank you, John. And can I have someone who can second that motion? Thank you, Matt. Okay, with that being said, we will move on to agenda item number 6, matters for consideration. So what we'll be doing, as I had said, we'll be moving to 6.4.
Excuse me, Mr.
So
Chair. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Could we have a vote on that new order of items, please?
Okay. So I will, we've had the motion and we've had someone second, but let's call a vote. All in favor in moving to a revised agenda? Aye. Okay. Any opposed? I have not seen any opposed. Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Okay. So moving matters for consideration, agenda item number 6. May I have a motion to move forward item 6.4 for consideration? Thank you, Matt. And will I have someone second that, please? Thank you, Neil. Okay, item 6.4, memorandum from planner request to remove 2632 and 34-38 Berksey Street from the Aurora Register of Properties of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest. First, we'll have a presentation by Neil Phillips, Project Manager, ERA Architects, Inc. Neil, this is your chance to proceed with the presentation this evening. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen. Is everyone able to see that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak to this this item agenda. My name is Neil Phillips. I'm a project manager at ERA Architecture, Inc. We are a planning and architecture firm based in Toronto that specializes in heritage architecture. I'm also joined on the line by Ryan Getter from Weston Consulting, who will be able to respond to anything specifically about the planning application proposed for this site. So starting off, just to kind of give everyone a little bit of context where we are in the process, we first prepared a heritage HIA, a heritage impact assessment in November 2020. And then in April, we issued that to city planning staff. In June, we're here. We're at the application for delisting. But in terms of the development application, it continues to be a work in progress with city staff. So in regard to the Sisseman Shoe Factory, as most of you are aware, I mean, the shoe factory was one of Aurora's kind of most notable and early industries, specifically producing shoes for both style, for work, and later on military. So you can see in this picture, this is a 1910 picture looking west from Bursey at the original site. This would later become what's known as Building 2. And you can see actually on the left-hand side of that photo, a mansion, a residential mansion, and that was the Sisseman mansion, which was occupied by the Sisseman family. And then on the right here, you can see an advertisement showing all the buildings almost all the buildings of the Sisseman factory. And the one in question at 34 Bursey is the one in the bottom left. So you can see the entire complex of the Sisseman factory was both on the north and south of Mosley Street along Berksey. With the buildings that we're speaking about today, both 34 and 38, later on the addition onto number 2. The primary factory for the majority of its lifespan, the warehouse or the manufacturing center was building number 1. So that's the one on the south, that was on the south corner, sorry, the northwest corner of both Mosley and Bursey. And that's a 3-story beautiful building that we'll show an image of in a moment. But building number 2, and then later on the building addition number 2, were primarily used for as a warehouse for storage, most notably for both samples in the front end where people could go in and take a look at the samples, as well then for the actual shoe rubber soles. Building number 2 and the addition were connected at one point by a smokestack and a broiler, which have since been removed. What's noted here as 4 on this map was where the mansion was, which was removed. It was built sometime before 1910 and removed around 1950. And then building number 1, the original factory, which was a 3-story factory, has since been demolished. And then building number 3 is what is currently 103 Mosley Street and still exists today. So you can see both 38, these are some photos taken a few weeks back. Both 34 and 38 Bursey have been heavily modified. So their stone construction has been stuccoed over. A lot of the windows, you can see in one of these images here on the left-hand side, the original arched windows, they've been removed and replaced. There's been new openings created, new entrances, accessory and ancillary structures built onto the site. And the same goes for 38 Bursey. You can see a lot of the contemporary modifications to the building that these buildings kind of switched use around the 70s originally to flea market, and then again in the early 2000s to commercial use, which is what it is now. But even some of the front entrances on 34 Bursey were removed. So a lot of the features that really made it made it what it was have been removed or heavily modified. And the same goes for both 26 and 32. Burzee, they've been both heavily modified over the years and they're also in need of maintenance in a lot of areas, and their integrity is really diminished due to both the nature of the modifications that were made, but also its current building condition. So in conclusion, these buildings really lack integrity, both because they've been so heavily modified and adapted over the years, but also their contextual relevance in terms of telling part of that story of the Sisseman factory has also changed dramatically, with the original factory gone, with the Sisseman mansion, and then the fact that they've been so heavily modified. They really struggle to tell the story of the factory that was there. And that goes also for the house farm buildings on 26 and 32 Burzee. They've been so heavily modified with really unsympathetic building alterations that their present integrity is heavily degraded. And it really has a limited ability to convey historical associations with the site's industrial past. So we very much are in line with the recommendations in the staff report that these buildings would best be interpreted through a combination of commemoration, interpretation, and of course a financial contribution to the Heritage Reserve. And thank you. That's it for my presentation.
Thank you, Neil. May I have a mover and seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion? And I am seeing Neil's screen, so I can't see all of my my committee members here. So I do see Bob. Thank you, Bob. I'll take you as the mover, and Matt, I will take you as the seconder. Thank you for that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Bob.
I'd like to change the motion that's in our agenda, change one word.
Okay.
So I'm looking at 6.4, excuse me, the second paragraph of the motion. Instead of refer to staff for consideration, I'd like to suggest that it be referred to council for consideration.
Okay, so what I will do, Bob, I'll read through these for the record, and we will open it up to discussion, and we can add that so it's part of the minutes and put that on the floor for discussion as well.
Okay.
So item 6.4, item number 1, that the memorandum regarding request to remove 2632 and 34-38 Berksey Street from the Aurora Register of Properties of Cultural Heritage Value of Interest be received, and that the Heritage Advisory Committee comments regarding the removal of 2632 and 34-38 Berksey Street from the Aurora Register of Properties of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest be received and referred to staff for consideration and further action as appropriate. At this point, does the committee have any questions for Neil regarding the presentation, or any questions or comments for staff? And Bob, we heard from you. Go ahead at this point.
So the motion that you just read is not the one that I put on the floor. I'd like to have our comments referred to council, not just to staff, to possibly be lost. If it makes people feel better, perhaps we could say referred to staff and to council. But I have a whole lot that I'd like to say about this.
Perfect. Okay, so now I'll ask the group, the Heritage Advisory Committee, with Bob's request. Yes, go ahead, Councillor Humphries.
I just will second that motion. If that's okay, then we can speak to it.
Yes,
And
so what we'll be doing is changing the motion, if it's appropriate, with to refer this to staff and council, and that we will put that on the floor. And Bob, I'm assuming that you will move that. Yes. And Sandra, I think you were seconding that. Are we all in favor of that motion? Anyone opposed? Okay, so that carries. Linda, is that okay? I will take that as a yes.
Sorry, for you, Mr. Chair.
I'm asking procedurally, Linda, have we covered that?
The comments will by default be forwarded to council through staff's report to general committee and council. So I'm not sure, I'm not sure that it's, not that it's not necessary, but your comments will be included in staff's, when they capture your comments for the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Linda. So I think from what we've just gone through, we've all made it very clear that we feel that this should go to staff and council.
Right.
So why don't we open this item up for discussion? So we have put this on the floor, it has been seconded, so we can open it up for discussion. And Bob, why don't we continue with you, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason to suggest a change to the motion, I'm not asking at this point, but I'm concerned about timeline, and I don't really know these days what is presented to council, whether staff does a report and tries to blend in our comments. What I'm suggesting with that motion is that our raw comments land in front of council as quickly as possible. So just to speak to things, if I'll continue, I'll start with the word paradoxical. And I had to look that up. It means self-contradictory. I think our agenda is somewhat self-contradictory. In item 6.1, Canadian Achievements mural, we're being asked to identify in this mural outstanding contributions to Canada and to Aurora. And yet in 6.4, we're saying, let's beat up on Thomas Sisman and Fred Underhill. Anyhow, back on track. I'm looking at, and I just wasn't sure the best way to suggest this. I could say page 36 of 349, or page 33 of 346, or simply page 1 of 7, looking at the report for 6.4. The last bullet on page 1 of 7, which is page 33 of 346, the heritage value of 34 and 38 Bursey Street will better be served through documentation. So I'd like to start by totally disagreeing with that, especially the phrase better served. I'd like to speak in defense of preservation of especially number 34 Bursey Street. According to the report before us, we did do an evaluation, at least the evaluation subcommittee did an evaluation March of 2020, and the score turned out at 85 out of 100, indicating that it's worthy of designation. So my first question through you, Mr. Chair, would be to Carlson or to Sandra. I'm wondering, did such a report go to council? The results of this evaluation of 34 Bursey, did it get before town council?
Through you, Mr. Chair, maybe I can answer this question. No, the evaluation result was not brought to council because the actual delisting of the property, this matter was never brought to Heritage Committee for formal discussion. Tonight is really the first time where this matter is being formally discussed by the Heritage.
Bob, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm just yelling at my wife to close the doors. She's come home and there's some background noise. So I'm bothered by that. I assumed that this did go before town council. Else, why would we bother doing an evaluation? I'm reading in the report on page I'm reading on page 2 that 34 Bursey contains a 2-story building which was formerly part of the Sisseman Shoe Factory, constructed in 1910. I think there's a misplaced modifier. The building was built in 1901. The other building, the factory began in 1910. So I think that sentence is a little bit misleading by 9 years. On page 3 of 7, 34 Bursey was mainly used for storage. Well, in some documentation that I've read, that was as of 1970. On page 5, I have notes that I'm reading, but I'm forming sentences. On page 5 of 7, or page 30, just say page 5 of 7, it speaks to the scoring system, whether current scoring system has been deemed outdated, to use the words in the report. I would say that's irrelevant for this meeting. It was the scoring system that existed in 2020. Is it being suggested that if this score, that the building should not score worthy of designation category? And I wonder what the new evaluation that the consultants have put together, is the reason for that paragraph to suggest under the new evaluation criteria, which is yet to be used by this committee, or almost yet to be seen by this committee. There's a subcommittee that's seen parts of it. If this building 34 would not score high with the new evaluation system, then I have absolutely no faith in this new evaluation system. Page 6 of 7, the end of the 3rd paragraph, speaks to none of them provide, so factory 2 and number 2 and number 4, none of them provide any sense of the industrial nature of the site, which is what makes them historically significant. I beg to differ. The location alone speaks to the industrial nature of the site. It's right across from the railroad. 1853 or 4 is when the railroad came to Aurora. Shipments were made across Canada, if not around the world. So I disagree with that statement. The last 2 paragraphs to me suggests that since so much of Sisseman's buildings have been demolished 40 or more years ago, we might as well demolish this one as well. I hope that's not the case, but I think that is the case, and I'm sad to have read that. Page 7 of 7, staff recognized the properties have historical value. I'm going to expand on that in just a moment. To me, much of the value is missing from this report. This report speaks to physical attributes that may or may not be there, but there's a whole lot of the historical value that to me is missing. I'll try to be somewhat brief, but there's a few tidbits that I'd like to share. I wish all of council was listening. I don't think I'm able to delegate before council. Sometimes the mayor tunes into these meetings. I wish he was with us this evening. Back in approximately 1901, there was a feud between Markham and Aurora. Markham is where the shoe company owned by Sisman and Underhill was located, and Aurora was trying to entice them to come to town. Aurora offered a bonus of $10,000 for land and buildings, free water rates for 10 years, free municipal taxes except for school taxes for 10 years, with the condition that at least 70 employees were to reside in Aurora. They took Aurora to court, Markham did, and they lost. The agreement was held to be legal, but Markham did not give up. They appealed to the Court of Appeal and won. However, Aurora really wanted the company for the town. They sought leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. Leave was refused. Aurora lost, and to add insult to injury, had to pay Markham costs fixed at $300. A couple of years later, a bill was passed in Ontario legislature, blah, blah, blah. The lawyer for Aurora was T.H. Lennox. T.H. Lennox was a former town councilor. He resigned from town council to be able to lodge this battle against Markham. I'm just looking at a wonderful little book. Some of you may have seen it once upon a time. I'm just wanting to see about T.H. Lennox. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm getting near the end. Thomas Herbert Lennox served as town councilor, 6 years as school board trustee. He resigned from town council to represent the town in the lawsuit brought on by Markham. He represented York North as an NPP, was a Conservative NP for Canada, all connected to 34 Bursey Street. The longest running general manager of Sisman's was Ross Linton Sr., formerly known as Roscoe. Roscoe's parents were married by Reverend Edwin, by Prime Minister Lester Pearson's dad. Ross Linton was a general manager for something like 40 years, and then was was a president of Sisman's. Ross Linton was a former mayor of Aurora. My goodness. I have 3 postcards of this 34 Bursey Street. I've got piles of postcards of the bigger main facility. The only other postcard that numbers more than 3 is the Fleury Plow Works. This must have been an important business and history in Aurora. Not just for Sisman, but with Fred Underhill. Underhill took on this building when he had a bit of a fight with Sisman and lasted till 1910, and that's when Sisman opened up the bigger building to the south. Almost done. I would suggest, rather than tearing down 34 Bursey, that it be incorporated or integrated into whatever development is to appear there. I'm understanding, and I suspect John Green can speak even more to ERA's ability to help the physicalness of incorporating or integrating a structure within another, in addition to robust, to use the word in the report, robust documentation on a very big plaque. I'm wondering, through you, Mr. Chair, my last question for now, when will this be coming to council or general committee?
Thank you, Bob. Carlson, are you able to answer that?
Yes, so through Mr. Chair, after we receive full comments from the Heritage Committee tonight, we can start preparing a recommendation report to the general committee. Now, we haven't determined the date for the GC meeting yet. We still have to look at the schedule to determine the most appropriate GC meeting that we can forward this application to. But following tonight's meeting, we can definitely start planning for the item to go to council for a decision.
Thank you, Carlson. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll give up for now.
Thank you, Bob. Do any members of the committee have any questions? Sandra, Councillor Humphreys, I see your hand go up. Go ahead.
To you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the opportunity. I can hear Bob's passion, and I have to say I was a little disappointed that Sisman Shoes is very, very significant in that building in particular. And one of my comments is, seeing a demolition for me is disappointing. I would love to see incorporation. There's ways to do it. There's so many examples. I'm not an expert by any means, but my son just moved into a building in Toronto, the Irwin Toy Building, and I bought his toys there when he was 3 years old, and on Hannah Street, and it was a very bad, like it was the only toy I had to go there because I couldn't buy it in any other place. And when he told me he was moving into this called the Toy Factory, I said, the toy building, I said, what? On Hannah Street? I said, that was 29 years ago. So anyway, just to say that there's ways that we can do this. This is a very significant part of our town. If there's any way that the developer can work some magic and incorporate the houses and the buildings any way possible, that's what we want to see here, and in particular in this area. I have an issue with 8 stories. I won't want to go here. That's not part of our purview. But I do support the passion in Bob's voice, and I'm sure if we could take another good look at this, that you'll find much history at your fingertips if you just put in Sisman Shoes anywhere. And I love the background story. I did not realize about the war we're at with Markham and taking to court. I think that's pretty incredible, and it's a history that we can't lose sight of. And again, the developers here, and I hope that you're listening, and there's ways we can make this happen. I know we can. So I will stop for a moment. And I do appreciate the fact that, Bob did ask to have our comments straight in. And I know Linda's response is, it's there, but there's a reason for that, in particular when it's a very significant part of our heritage. That's why I really support having comments specified as from the committee. And that's all for now. I'll listen to my peers. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Go ahead, Neil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a quick question for Bob, just to clarify something through you, and then I can proceed further. Bob, was 34 the original building when Sisman and I forget the name of the other company. When the partnership started in Aurora, when they moved to Aurora, was that the original building?
Yes. So it's in my mind, it's the bigger one is where Attridge has a parking lot, but this was the first.
This was the first. 34.
Yeah.
I thank you, Bob.
38 came along after the house was torn down.
Yeah, 38 is obviously a later construction. I think it's 1940 something. Thanks for that, Bob. I didn't want to be off track in assuming the importance of this, but I'll just ride on Bob's coattails. I was very disappointed that the assessment we did 15 months ago sat in the planning department and didn't make its way to council. And Carlson, I know I did reach out to you a couple times to ask you what was happening with that. And you confirmed that it was, there was a planning application in process. I didn't know that we would be now behind the 8 ball the night before a public planning meeting where this will be presented to the public and council. So I'm a little bit equally disappointed and upset with how this process has unfolded. As someone who sits on the steering group that did the impact assessment on this, along with John and Bob and Matthew, I'm also disappointed that I wasted my time to do this. And while we recognize that the other structures maybe don't have any heritage value, we did give this a high score, as Bob pointed out. You know, I stand behind that. And I think that the fact that this building has been modified somewhat, unfortunately, should not discourage us or dissuade the argument that it's worthy of preservation. I think that a rigorous intervention, rehabilitation is entirely possible. I mean, I will ask the architect about that in a second, but you know, in terms of devaluing it because of the loss of original site and components of the original site, we do have precedents in town right across Wellington with the, I don't know what is, the Baldwin building that was, you know, what we have preserved is the facade of a later building and one of the latest components of that site, where everything else has been removed. The grist mill is long since gone. The silos are gone. This part that we did preserve, the facade of which was around 1937, and the addition to the rear of that was, I think, around in the 40s or 50s, much later. And council agreed with us that it was still worthy of designation. We also have a lot of buildings in our downtown that have been modified and lost some of their heritage integrity. One of the storefronts was recently renovated, and the heritage attribute storefront was removed. And this is with designation, and it was allowed to happen. And so we allow things to happen, but when it comes time to do the heavy lifting and maybe save something, we tend to sort of shy away from that. And the building that has the mural going on it on this agenda is also stuccoed. It's not the original finish on the building. I believe it is a masonry building, but we recently designated that building as it is. And I'm not saying that the stucco is favorable, but we have given that building designation. Now, in terms of the stucco on this building, it is parging. And I did look at it with a mason that I know in town, and it's a thin coat of parging that I'm sure it's going to cost money, but I think it could probably be removed. As far as the building itself, it may be unremarkable. Even in its original form, it was somewhat unremarkable. But that was the way they built industrial buildings back then. And we continue to build unremarkable industrial buildings. That's the nature of industrial buildings. They're basic. And this was reflective of the time. And as Bob pointed out, it's on the rail corridor. It's the last standing building of its vintage along the rail corridor. It's the last piece of our industrial history on the railway. We have other examples with the plow works, but that's on the west side of Yonge Street. So I think these things together do make a strong case along with the history. And so it has the architecture does have integrity. In terms of modifications, I mean, there are new windows in there that, you know, I don't think that should stop us. I think they could be replaced with something far more appropriate. You know, we allow this to happen in houses around town and other buildings. So to me, they're non-issues. I don't know that I've missed anything for now. I mean, I did have a lot to say about the new development, which maybe isn't in our purview, but I see that the new development has sort of taken cues from this building, and I don't see why we can't integrate this building when you have based your first few floors, your podium, so to speak, is based on this style of building, of construction. So why this isn't possible, I don't know. And in terms of reuse, these buildings are perfect for reuse. I lived in a building, the Robert Watson Candy Factory in Toronto in the 1980s, when it was illegal to live in these buildings. And they were modified beyond belief. There was drywall everywhere, but the beauty of these open floor plans, the way they were designed and built, the integrity on the interior, the post and beam construction can all be, you can rip out all that drywall, all those drop ceilings, and you have all of the original structural elements, which is basically what was there when it was a factory, because they were mostly used as open planned, and they had, you know, a degree of flexibility in terms of adapting to technology and how technology would change. I don't know if I've convinced anybody yet, but hopefully together we're all convinced this is worthy. You know, I also want to draw attention to the Armory, another beloved building in this town that we recently put a lot of taxpayer money into. And so, you know, the taxpayer is willing to foot the bill to save important buildings. The Armory was a utility building. It was a shed. It was a barn that was built and adapted into an armory later on. And it had all sorts of modifications. And we have further modified it. And we poured a new concrete floor. We removed all the skin from the interior and the exterior, and we reskinned it. We put new openings on one side. We tore down one of the components to the south end, a single story, I think it was a workroom or something. And so to think that we can't save this building and do it justice is maybe a failure of imagination, and maybe a failure to believe in the power of architecture to do its job and rehabilitate old buildings and integrate them into new buildings. And, you know, we still want to grow. And believe me, I am not against this development per se. I am just very upset how this has unfolded, and how this this building has been ignored. And maybe we lost a year in integrating this, you know, where we could have passed this designation, and the architects and designers could have been working with this time in the past year to bring us something that incorporated this building. And instead, here we are. That's all I'll say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Any other members of the committee like to comment? John, please go ahead.
Yes, echoing Bob McRoberts, looking at when it was evaluated about a year and a half ago, of which I was a member at the time, we gave it, as Bob said, a good high score of 85. I don't know what the new regulations would end up with as far as another score goes, but I guess my question I'm leading up to is, if this is going to be presented to council, who has the last say in this, who will be the person that will present? Will it just be a staff report? Will it be somebody from HAC? Maybe it's Carlson himself that presents it. And what kind of background and what kind of I don't want to use the word emotion, but what has been expressed tonight to maintain this heritage and incorporate any new development with the SISMA building as it was. Carlson, can you, or through you, Mr. Chair, could you ask Carlson who that person might be?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So when we bring a final recommendation report to council, the report will have a section that talks about the Heritage Advisory Committee's comments. That's the section where we will include comments that we hear tonight. And also, just for council's information, normally after the minutes has been prepared, the minutes will be circulated to council for approval to ensure that they're fully aware of the discussion that took place today about this item. Sorry, can you hear me? Did you?
Yeah, I heard you, Carlson. Sorry, I was on mute. Councillor Humphreys, I see you have a question as well.
I just wanted to add, for John's sake and the committee, when something like in particular comes up that I'll absolutely express the comments this evening if the committee wants that. I'll absolutely do that. And I hear it loud and clear, and I feel the same way. Also, councillors will be looking at the minutes and listening, and will ask questions about what did the committee think, what did they feel, what was the reactions. So that will be articulated, but also it's a public planning meeting. So if anyone here would like to delegate, it's open. You don't have to pre-sign. It's an open forum where you go in and you've got your 5 minutes to speak. So if anyone here feels even more please, it's open. So I will be articulating the thoughts this evening, but absolutely we'll go that route.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, discussion items? We also have Neil here from ERA if there are any questions that that you have for him from the group. Okay, I've not seen any, and oh, go ahead, Councillor Humphreys.
Sorry, just through Mr. Mayor, to you, Neil. You've heard some comments this evening. Wondering if you would consider take a thought, another kick at your approach, and see about integration, keeping our heritage. We're a passionate group. We're here to do our best to try to honor and protect our history. This is very significant. You heard that tonight, and maybe surprisingly so for you, I'm not sure, but Sisseman Shoes is probably, Bob can correct me if I'm wrong, but the biggest manufacturer of our town's history, and the significance of the boots and soldiers who wore them, and everything else. It's really significant, incredibly significant. So what you're hearing tonight is if the architects, the owners, the developers would take a look and see if there's a way they can incorporate, in particular, this 34 Burzee would be really something that would show the partnership is what I'm trying to articulate. Thanks.
Thank you. Neil, do you want to respond to that before we move? Matt, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, if I could just have a minute. I'm just wondering whether the developer really gave much consideration to trying to incorporate sort of the building itself and the Sisseman history. As Sandra pointed out, we've got the toy lofts. Neil pointed out the Watson factory. Like, these are all big marketing things. The Sisseman, there might be an opportunity here to kind of integrate that into the, to restoring the building to some degree, integrating it into the front facade, and capitalizing on the Sisseman branding, if you will. And in exchange for the builder going to the lengths it would take financially to restoring that facade, maybe council and heritage looks more favorably on the larger size. It's all about square footage at the end of the day. So he wants 8 stories. Maybe he gets what he wants if we get what we want, which is to try and restore something that is significant to the town. Because at the end of the day, it's all square footage. And the facade I do like that they're presenting. I just think you could integrate the restored Sisseman building into the front of that, and it would work quite well. So I just wondered if, in consideration, if the builder has thought about that, and as a heritage group as well as council, we could maybe look more favorably on their overall application if they were willing to work. And it's going to cost a lot of money. I've done a lot of restorations. It's not cheap. but you could make it look like it did the day it was built with money. And I think that would go a long way to the marketing of the building for the builder, as well as creating something other than a plaque that we could look at and say, hey, there's the old Sisman building. So that's all I wanted to say. I agree with what everybody else has been saying so far as well.
Thank you. Neil, do you want to take the opportunity to respond or to provide a closing here, if you will?
Certainly. Yeah, through you. I think we thought the most effective strategy to importance of not only factory but this area of this industrial heritage of the area was through an interpretation strategy, and that means also in our proposal, like picking up on elements, masonry elements. On the design, the orientation of the buildings, and really incorporate those into the contemporary proposal that that has been submitted to the city planning department. And we think that because of the diminished integrity of the building, and that means also like the items that have been removed from the building, including the smokestack, the boiler room, as well as the number of alterations that have occurred throughout the building's existence. So our recommendation is that a contemporary interpretation of those elements to convey that history, as well as really thorough documentation of the buildings and commemoration of the buildings. And we really, your comments are well noted, and we really do appreciate kind of everyone's passion and insight on this building. And they're well noted, and we'll take them into consideration certainly, and share that with the development team and the architecture team. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Neil. Any other final comments from the committee before we move on to the next item?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Neil. Yep.
Okay, sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Carlson. I just want some clarification on the assessment criteria that's been revised as of February this year. Hello, Carlson. Yeah, hi. The scoring system that we used last year, we've replaced it. Did that automatically negate anything that was in process that had not been brought to council? Is that what I'm understanding by that assertion?
No. So through you, Mr. Chair, first of all, I just want to clarify that the new classification system is still being finalized because it has not been formally presented to the Heritage Committee for comments. It has been brought to the steering committee, but not to the actual Heritage Committee for formal comments. So based on the advice provided by the town's heritage consultant, going forward, whenever we evaluate these type of delisting application, then we would try to focus more on the criteria that's prescribed in the Ontario regulation 0906 as opposed to using a scoring system. I guess the answer to your question is anytime we receive any new application that has to be reviewed, we will go through this. We're not going to do it based on the scoring system. We're just going to evaluate based on the criteria of the 0906.
Okay, thank you. And so I don't know how many properties we assessed after March the 5th last year. I can only think of one, 28 Wellington. And that we did in August, and by October, the building received its designation. And so, an assessment that was 5 months after this building was sort of fast-tracked, or I don't know if you call that fast-tracked, but relatively speaking, was fast-tracked and basically jumped the queue. And this one was left behind in the planning department, and I don't want to make accusations. I'd like to know why that is, and why this one in particular didn't make it. And yeah.
So through Mr. Chair, the reason for the delay is because the intention was to wait for the applicants to submit a new development proposal, because if we are removing such a significant heritage building, we would like to provide information to the Heritage Committee in terms of what type of buildings would be replacing this Sisseman Refractory building. And the applicant did submit their application, I could be wrong, but January 2020, around that time. But then the proposal that was submitted at that time was somewhat preliminary. We thought there was still a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of details needs to be added to the elevation before we present it to the Heritage Committee. And then after that, unfortunately, the pandemic hits, which delayed the process. And it took the applicant some time to finalize the elevation design and address some of the technical comments that were added on their submission. So recently, we finally received their resubmission with a more finalized elevation plans, conceptual plans. So that's why we thought this is a good opportunity to bring this delisting application to the Heritage Committee, together with the more finalized elevation design to the Heritage Committee, and hopefully we can get some preliminary comments. I know this is not really the main focus of this discussion, but then since we have an active planning application, we thought the Heritage Committee could provide some preliminary comments. So that was the intention.
Okay, but we're not commenting on the application per se. We're only commenting on the removal of this. So, I mean, from my point of view, I understand the process. I just, from my point of view, there's a lot of material there that really isn't necessary for us to review. In terms of the resubmission, I mean, was the applicant made aware that there was a pending designation on this? Maybe not pending in terms of, but at least that it had been recently assessed. It was given a high score and was potentially going to be designated, or at least there was a lot of energy from the working group to have it designated. I mean, it didn't even come to the committee for a discussion, but I mean, I don't think anybody can be surprised by this reaction, or they shouldn't be anyway. At least anybody who knew this was that it had been assessed. Will the original impact assessment be distributed to council? Will it be brought forward at any point? Or is that going through the shredder until we reassess it? Because if we haven't approved the new criteria, and we're not, I don't know when, well, I think we're meeting the end of this month, the steering group. But still, this committee's not meeting until September. Whether or not that's ready for us to review, I mean, we're really putting everybody behind the 8 ball, the developer included. But you know, I think that we've wasted a lot of time and maybe used that time to assume that we were going to be able to demolish this building. I'm curious to know, I mean, I know how Sandra feels. I'm just curious to know how the rest of council would view this, this process. Yeah. Anyway, I have more questions. Thank you, Carlson. I have more questions for Mr. Phillips, through you, Mr. Chair. And I'll try to keep it brief. I mean, did you, Mr. Phillips, hi. I think I should preface this by saying I do really like what you've brought in terms of a design. I don't have a lot of issues with it. Not many at all, except for this. And I wondered how, I'm curious to know what the discussion was over at ERA concerning this, and if you were aware of the fact that there was some energy and it was highly scored, and that the community, I mean, from what I understand, our council really values public input, and a lot of things go through public filters here. And this committee, as all heritage committees are chosen by council, we're appointed by council every term. And so I would trust and hope that they have faith in our judgment. And especially with Bob, who has lived here all his life and has actively documented history for people like me who are new in town to review. So I just wonder what ERA, I don't want to sound glib, but like, what's plan B if this gets designated? And I'd hate to think that we've engineered an outcome so that you can go ahead with your building. I think that we should go through a process, and I hope that that it's either adaptable. I hope you don't have to go back to the drawing board, because it looks like some work has been put into this. So I guess my question is, how do you see this going forward in terms of a designation, should that happen?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks. I really do appreciate that comment, and it is like something that we do consider a range of development scenarios when we do our impact assessment. The impact assessment, we're responding to how can a proposal in front of us both mitigates any potential impacts as well as conserve any piece of the site. And one element of the assessment that we did for this building was we thought that a response that was stronger on interpreting in a contemporary fashion, like those elements, like the masonry work, the windows, everything, was a much more effective way to communicate the history of the site, to commemorate the shoe factory, and overall was the strongest approach for the site. That being said, if there were to be designation, we would have to work with the developer and the architecture team to consider what that looks like. But we really put, I think, our best foot forward, and we spent a lot of time with the architects looking through other adjacent buildings in the area, and like, for example, we picked up on the rectilinear form that are in the area and how those kind of butt onto the street, and the window detailing. It wasn't something that that was kind of we had a proposal first and we just kind of worked backwards. It really was a collaborative effort right from the start of how do we make a really terrific contribution, not only to the area's historic context, but also from an urban design standpoint of like what works and what really fits with this evolving context along Bursey.
So just to follow up on that, I'm not trying to get you to agree to something prematurely, but there could be there could be the possibility that this is workable. I mean, if you have to, I guess you have to. But I know that you've done other projects that have involved buildings of this type, and I have faith that you're qualified. Your firm is qualified to understand and demonstrably can work with older buildings and integrate them into new developments. I mean, there are examples all over Toronto of your work, and others that I'm sure that some are not great integrations and others are better, and of other people's work I'm speaking of. But I think you do. Were you involved in the distillery district at some point? You're not you, but I mean your firm. Was the RA part of that? I mean, they're not necessarily comparable by any stretch. I mean, I understand that I've done work in there in the fermenting cellar and in the I forget where the Soul Pepper Theater is. I mean, I know that these buildings can be adapted, and often, and I will reiterate your point about some of the original things being removed from this particular building, like the boiler and the chimney, and yeah. I think to some degree, and I'll ask you rather than stating this, doesn't that make your job easier in terms of integrating this and creating a more, urban friendly, dense environment, not having to work around the smokestack and the boiler and the addition that was on the side that I think had a loading dock on it at one point. I would assume that if you have a simpler form, which you have, that it may actually integrate a lot easier in terms of geometry and basic shapes kind of thing. Or am I wrong in assuming that? I mean, some of the things we like, I mean, I understand, some of those big industrial elements are exciting, but, they're not very habitable environments for residents. So, am I correct in assuming that maybe this is easier to integrate down the road?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, to some degree. For example, if there were still a broiler room or the smokestack, that was certainly at a constraint that may be more difficult to work with. But it really was, we kind of came back to what we thought was best practice for, heritage best practice for this, was rather than conserving the facade of the building and doing something that felt inauthentic, was to reinterpret it through contemporary means. And really then also focus on the interpretation, commemoration of the site, as well as very thorough documentation of the current building. But yeah, certainly we do have experience with those type of projects, including Distillery District, but we thought the best approach for this building, given the serious interventions that have happened over the past 50 years, that reinterpretation through contemporary means was most appropriate.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I see a couple hands up. Sandra, Councillor Humphreys, your hand has been up for a while, so I will throw it over to you.
Thank you. Mine's a little off topic. I just wanted to make a note. If staff can go back and check the process out, that the current rating system needs to remain in effect and is valid until a new system comes forward and this committee and council votes on it. I believe that's a process that we need to just check and validate. So can I just get confirmation that staff will go back and check? I know we are updating, changing, but I believe it's something that we all need to vote on and agree to. And until then, the current rating system that is in effect remains in effect. Just wanted to double check that. Perhaps staff. Thanks. Through Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Carlson, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, staff would definitely take this back and look at the system, look at the process.
Great. Thank you, Carlson. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Bob, I see your virtual hand is up there as well. Did you have something you wanted to comment on? Bob, you are on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2-3 times a week, my beagle and I have walked past 34 Bursey, along Bursey. And for this past year, I've been under the impression that the building was designated. I'm feeling like I've lost faith in the process, and through you, this is somewhat directed to Carlson, but or to any staff member who might be listening. I've been on this committee for 18 years. We don't usually evaluate a property to not, and to find that it's worthy of designation, to just put it on hold. There's somewhat a built-in assumption that, 85%, let's designate that property. Otherwise, why would we be asked in the first place? To me, it doesn't make sense just because somebody wants to develop the property, let's not designate. We don't need the owner's permission to do a designation. I'm wondering through you, Mr. Chair, to Carlson, Are there any other buildings or properties or landscapes that we have evaluated that have been worthy of designation that have not been designated?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no. This is the only one.
Which again, thank you, Carlson, makes me have lost faith in the system. It seems like something nefarious, if that's the right word, has been going on. This building over a year ago was worthy of designation and no action was taken other than to have it sit. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Bob. Does staff want to comment on that, or are there any other comments from the committee at this time?
So through you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Carlson.
Sorry. So through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so as mentioned, our intention was really to wait for the development plans to be more finalized, because we know there's an active application submitted for this property, and we know at some point, given that there's some heritage heritage status on this property, we thought that we should present the drawings to the Heritage Committee to make sure that they are aware of what's being proposed. And another thing that kind of caused the delay is because of the peer review process we've undertaken. Because after we undertook the evaluation with the working group, we did provide some comments to the applicant saying that the property has been evaluated by the town's working group, and it will score a very high score and suggesting is worthy of designation. So we did advise them that we will retain a heritage consultant to do a peer review of this property. And then after we did the peer review, we noticed that there's some missing information in their heritage impact assessment that needs to be added. And then there were just a lot of work that was done before between the applicant's consultant and also the town's heritage consultant. And that also contributed to the delay as well. But the main reason for the delay is really we were going to wait for the elevation plans to be more finalized so we can present it to the Heritage Committee to let them know that what will be replacing, not replacing, but then the plans that the developer has in mind.
As a follow-up, Mr. Chair, I would say either a property is worthy of designation or it's not, regardless of what's planned for the property. That's irrelevant. It's the building, that's the property, it's the history, that's the value of it, regardless of what's planned. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Do we have any other questions, comments on this matter at this time? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Very robust discussion this evening. And I would like to thank everyone for their comments on this matter. If there are no further comments, I'll call the vote on the matter. All in favor? Any opposed? I've seen none opposed. Thank you. Thank you, Neil, for your time tonight. So with that,
Mr. Chair,
I will move. Yes, go ahead, Bob.
Sorry to interrupt. Wonder if I might put a motion on the floor that probably can't, because I think we have no power, but I would like to put a motion that says I would recommend to council that we pursue designation of 34 Bursey Street.
Go ahead, Councillor Humphries.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and we'll consult staff on that in a moment if you don't mind. But I do believe that that's what we need to put in the report, and that this is. I will be bringing this forward tomorrow night at public planning. This is very clear. I've heard comments tonight, and it'll be very straightforward because just to you, Mr. Chair, and my apologies if it's inappropriate, but to Bob's point, we designate buildings and residents, business owners can try to appeal. and there's a process for appealing. So this should have been designated. I don't know what happened, and I'm going to be asking for a review on this. This is not how things work. So we'll have to just go back and figure it out and ensure that this doesn't happen again. We designate, and there's an appeal process. Okay, but I will bring that forth to you, Mr. Chair. It will be clear that this is what this committee wanted. That this was, we all felt it was protected, and we were, okay, sorry. I didn't mean to speak, Bob, on further, but that's what I'll be commenting on tomorrow night.
Thank you. Is that, Bob, are you okay with that?
That would be, that's fine. I just want to put for whoever, whatever interest. I thought public planning meetings were always on Wednesdays. I've got 4 school board meetings tomorrow from 3 until about 9, so I don't think I'll be able to participate in the planning meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Humphreys, for that. Moving on to the next agenda item, based on the revised agenda, item 6.5. 6.5 is memorandum from planner request to remove 103 Mosley Street from the Aurora Register of Properties of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest. And first we'll have a presentation by Mike Bennett, planner, WND Associates Limited, and Neil Phillips, project manager, ERA Architects Incorporated. Just a reminder, you have 5 minutes for your presentation, and it's currently 8:37. Mike, Neil, please proceed.
Good evening, through you, Mr. Chair, and to members of the Heritage Committee. My name is Mike Bennett. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this evening regarding the property at 103 Mosley Street. I'm the planner at W&D Associates. We're the planning consultant for the owner of the properties located at 120 Metcalf Street, 101 and 103 Mosley Street. So this evening I'll be speaking briefly before passing it back to Neil Phillips, who's also representing our project as well. And speak briefly to express my support for the request to remove 103 Mosley Street from Aurora's Register of Properties of Cultural Heritage Value. As outlined in the staff report prepared for the committee, the request to delist the existing building at 103 Mosley Street has been made in order to accommodate the development of a mixed-use mid-rise building fronting along Birksey Street with additional townhouse units to the west of the mid-rise along a private laneway. So an application for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment was submitted to the town in support of this proposal in December 2020. And I won't get into the details of that too much, given that the delisting is at issue this evening. But the applications did include a heritage impact assessment prepared by our colleagues at ERA Architects Incorporated. And since the submission, our project team has been engaged with town planning staff to refine the design of the proposed building and its site plan. This consultation is ongoing and will continue as we prepare for an eventual resubmission of our planning applications. So we've reviewed the staff report. We are supportive of its findings and its recommendations. And these recommendations include the delisting of the property at 103 Mosley Street. And along with that, that the new development on the subject site be conditional on a robust documentation of the building, provision of commemorative measure, and a financial contribution to the town's Heritage Reserve Fund. And I'm paraphrasing the staff report in that regard. So again, my colleague Neil Phillips from ERA Architects will be providing a more detailed presentation that outlines the rationale for the delisting of the site. So I will defer to Neil to provide his expertise on related questions on the agenda item at hand, which is, of course, the request to remove that property. from the Heritage Register. If you do have any high-level questions regarding the proposal, I'd be happy to answer those kind of within, I guess, the scope of this meeting. But otherwise, thank you again for providing me with the time to speak. And if we can pass it off to Neil, I can be certainly pleased if we could do that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mike. Neil?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the interest of time, this presentation is largely the same as the one previously, because it is dealing with the site just immediately to the south of the previous site. So I'll move through these quickly so that we can have a good discussion about the proposal and about this building. So yeah, similarly, this building is also an ancillary building to the main factory, which you can see here in this image. The 3-story building with the water tower was building 1. And you can see annotated in the blue is the building we're speaking about today on Moseley. The building was used as an ancillary purpose, so it was mostly for the grommets, some of the riveting of the boots, as well as for warehouse uses later on in its history. So you can see it here noted as number 3 in the pink color. The building was built in 1940 and 1941. And it presently is, these are images taken a few weeks ago. The building is in need of a significant intervention to maintain its structural integrity. It has been heavily altered and modified over the past decades. So you can see in the first image on the east elevation, the boarded windows. The masonry units are in a state of disrepair. There's missing mortar. The bricks are spalled, damaged, and missing in a lot of places. The north elevation, so the principal elevation, at one point was heavily modified to be closer to a commercial entrance, which is not in keeping character with its previous use and its industrial character. On the west elevation, same thing, that a lot of the brick openings, or a lot of the openings, have been bricked over, and entrances added on the east elevation. You can also note that the property is quite overgrown, and some of the vegetation has actually started to damage the bricks on the east elevation. More images of the cracking mortar and the loss of the altered front. As well, just more images of kind of the blocked over windows and the generally poor brick condition. So our conclusions remain very much the same as they were for 34 Bursey, that the building is in a state of disrepair, that its integrity, really a lot of the character elements and character features that define it as a warehouse building are degraded and thoroughly diminished. Its contextual relationship to the remainder of the Sisseman Shoe Factory, so including the principal building, building number 1, and the removed building, it is no longer immediately apparent that building was contributing to that factory context. And once again, a lot of the original features have been seriously altered or reduced in integrity. So we also very much support the conclusions that are in the staff report, that the best approach for this site is the thorough documentation of the existing building, as well as interpretation, elements being referenced, the new proposals referencing historical elements, materials, and as well as financial contribution to the Heritage Reserve. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Neil. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion? I see John as a mover. A seconder, please. Actually, I am just seeing Neil on the screen, so if I can have someone second that verbally, that would be appreciated.
Matthew will second.
Thank you, Matthew. So the item 6.5-1, that the memorandum regarding request to remove 103 Mosley Street from the Aurora Register of Properties of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest be received, and that the Heritage Advisory Committee comments regarding the removal of 103 Mosley Street from the Aurora Register of Properties of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest be received and referred to staff for consideration and further action as appropriate. At this time, does the committee have any questions for Mike and Neil regarding the presentation, or any questions or comments for staff?
Hi, Mr. Chair, may I have
Councillor Humphries. Yep.
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, did we as an evaluation team have an opportunity to perform an evaluation on 103 Mosley?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no,
Go ahead,
this
Carl.
was not. Through Mr. Chair, no, this property was not evaluated by the workings group because staff were under the impression, maybe we can look at the process further, but then we were under the impression that we're going to discontinue the use of the evaluation.
Oh my goodness.
System. And so that's why this property was never evaluated by the working group, and we're taking it straight to the Heritage Committee for comment.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Carlson, for that. I think we've got a big gap here. We had this at the original onset of HAC, where we would provide input after and then do an evaluation afterwards. We can't do that. We have to be in front of these. And I feel that we're in a position this evening that we can't. I am not personally comfortable in providing any feedback until we do an evaluation of this building. I'm sorry, but I just can't. I mean, I'm just hearing what the developer is telling me, and this is a significant part of our heritage again, and it may be not worthy, but it's listed and we haven't done an evaluation yet. So unfortunately for me, I will not be supporting this at all. So we need to get in front of these. We need to get this clarified right away. This is something that shouldn't have happened. Thanks.
Do any other committee members have any comments or questions? Go ahead, Bob.
I agree with Sandra's sentiments. The new evaluation scheme has not been brought to this committee, so we have a evaluation scheme that's been used for the last dozen years, designed by a previous heritage planner with the town. I'd also like to suggest that the council's new system of meeting every second month seems to have flaws. We used to meet every month except August. If we met more frequently, maybe there'd be fewer holes in this system. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, sorry, one other point.
Yep, please proceed.
I was just looking for the title, but then it was my turn to speak. If it's called a heritage impact assessment, the one that's on our report is from the developer, not from the town. Not to say that it's wrong, it's just from the point of view of the people that would like to tear down the building. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Go ahead, Councillor Humphries.
To you, Mr. Chair, my apologies. I mean no disrespect to the developers that are here this evening, okay? It's got nothing to do with you at all. We have an internal process that should be followed, and it has not been. We'll get confirmation from the director, but this committee is charged with the protection of our heritage. That's what we do, and we're happy to hear what is coming our way from a town perspective, but we are in no position to give it any real feedback until we do our own assessment, and then we discuss it. And this could have been a different conversation, but to Bob's point, we did used to meet monthly. Maybe not enough on the agenda, but there always is, really. So I think we need to have them back in our calendars monthly and cancel if we don't make it. I just think we need to be very lockstep together. And I do believe that I know COVID's changed a lot, but we need to be a little tighter. So I mean, no disrespect to the architects and developers. We don't have, we are not prepared. Well, in my personal opinion, we're not prepared to provide any input at this point until we have our own evaluation performed. My apologies, Carlson, if I'm saying too much, but I think at this point we really need to do what we normally do.
Thank you, Sandra. Go ahead, Carlson.
Sorry, through Mr. Chair, I just want to quickly clarify one thing is the town did do a heritage evaluation of this property. I mean, of course, it's not the usual process of sitting down with the heritage working group to do a scoring exercise. Maybe it was a communication gap. We were under the impression that we're going forward work with the heritage consultant who's currently undertaking a comprehensive review of the register. So for this property, the delisting of this property, we did sit together with the heritage consultant, the MHPC, who's undertaking the review of the register, and their recommendation is consistent with the heritage impact assessment that the property does not have sufficient value to warrant heritage designation. So I just want to clarify that a heritage evaluation was undertaken for this property.
Thank you, Carlson. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Go ahead, Neil. Neil, you are on mute.
Hi.
There you go. Thank you.
So, Carlson, through you, Mr. Chair, to Carlson, when you did that assessment with the consultants, is there paperwork? Is there a report that I don't see it here, but maybe I've missed it.
So through you, Mr. Chair, so the evaluation result of that evaluation was just summarized in the staff report, but that was a summary evaluation sheet that was prepared by the consultant, and staff can definitely send that evaluation sheet to the Heritage Committee members after tonight's meeting.
Is there a reason why it wasn't included tonight? Because just to preface that, I do remember having that discussion on February 26th, and I did ask the Director of Planning if I don't know who mentioned it first, but somebody, it was either you or he, that said that the consultant would take over until we had the new score sheet or the new system in place. During this review of the entire list, the CHL, I think it is, that the consultant would be undertaking this task rather than the working group, or is that the working group?
Yeah.
So I'll clarify. I do remember that specifically because I did say, is the evaluation working group now out of a job? And he answered me yes. But still, I would have liked to have seen that in this report, so that at least as a committee and me as a former member of that working group, I could have seen how this scored and what was evaluated. Because when we evaluated something, you basically gave us, a mini report, so to speak, on history with research in it, and I don't see any of that here, and so that is concerning. And so that's what I'm missing as well. And so I'm with Bob and Sandra on that. Yeah. Oh, actually, no, I had one more point. When did this application come to you? And for this proposal before us?
Sorry, through Mr. Chair, you talk about the actual planning application?
Planning application, yes.
It was submitted. I'm just trying to find the exact date. Just bear with me.
Just roughly, even the year is fine.
It's roughly in around January of 2021.
This year, okay.
This year.
Yeah, okay. Because I know that the ratepayers group in the southeast area did meet with that developer in 2018. It was during the election that the group met with that developer and looked at this site and looked at this proposal. It may have been, may have evolved since then, but I just know that this is it's not like something that just came in the last few months. It's sort of been percolating for 2018 now, 3 years. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Any other comments, questions related to this matter? I've not seen any hands, not seen any questions or comments. Okay. If that's the case, I will ask if there are no further comments. I'll be calling a vote. All in favor? So before we call the vote, and I'm not going to take that, Sandra, it seemed like you were just itching to get a question in.
I just wanted to, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Before we vote,
No, absolutely. Go ahead.
Maybe a question to staff, Linda, in terms of process. I think, in terms of this one, the way it came through is don't take no comment as a positive. We have to make it clear that the committee in general, unless there's any objections, haven't done an evaluation in terms of what we know is in place, and that no comment here doesn't mean compliancy or everything's okay. Can we just make sure that that's noted?
Through Mr. Chair, this is noted. So
Okay.
Before we prepare any recommendation report, we'll make sure we bring it back to HAC for a second review.
Perfect.
And that would be after a
After clarification.
scoring exercise will be done first, and then we'll go to Heritage Committee.
Great. Thank you very much, Carlson. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Sandra, I think that was made quite clear by a number of us here today. So I will put this to a vote now at this time. So all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Neil, for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, moving forward to the next agenda item number 6.6. Item 6.6 is a roundtable discussion heritage permit application file HPA-2021-07, 28 Wellington Street West. This was an added item. May I have a mover and seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion? You see Neil is moving the item. And I think I saw Bob's hand as seconding the item. The item that the Heritage Advisory Committee comments regarding heritage permit application file HPA-2021-07, 28 Wellington Street West be received and referred to staff for consideration and further action as appropriate. Would staff like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Linda, am I able to share the screen?
Yes, you may.
Okay. Can everybody see the drawings in your screen?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so this was an add-on item, so unfortunately staff did not have enough time to prepare a memo for this item. So planning department was advised by operations that the retaining walls along the frontage of 28 Wellington Street, so it'll be along Wellington and Metro Avenue, that it's presenting some because it's deteriorating. And operations is currently working with a consultant to try to replace the retaining walls. However, because this property was recently designated under the Heritage Acts, and the retaining wall was specifically identified as one of the attributes to be protected. So the proposed work will require a heritage permit. Under normal circumstances, of course, that will bring a heritage report to the Heritage Committee first and then to Council for decision. Now, since we don't have a heritage meeting until September of this year, This means that the earliest we will be able to get council's decision on this retaining wall will be close to October. And operation indicates that given this is an urgent situation and would request that we try to streamline the process for the application. So staff did suggest that maybe we can try a streamlined process similar to some of the other applications that was submitted for this property, where we would send the information to the Heritage Committee for review via email. And then after we receive those comments, then we can send a report directly to council decision. However, some of the committee members mentioned that this is a pretty important matter and should be discussed at the committee level. So that's why staff is for bringing this matter as an add-on item to the Heritage Committee meeting for discussion. That concludes my introduction.
Thank you, Carlson. Does the committee have any questions or comments for staff this evening?
Mr. Chair.
John. Oh, sorry.
John, is it, John, I think I saw your hand up there. We can go to you first.
Yes. I have a very quick question for Carlson. And you may or may not be able to divulge this. What's the considered overall cost to do this to the town?
Through Mr. Chair, unfortunately, I don't have the answer. My understanding, I could be wrong, but I'll confirm with Operations Department. This will be part of the capital project, because many portion of the retaining wall is actually located within the public right of way. So it will be treated as almost like a part of the right of way improvement project. So that's my understanding. But I will confirm with the operations an answer.
Okay. Thank you. Neil, I believe I heard you.
Yep, and I'll try to keep it brief. I know that this is a short item and we're pressed for time. Carlson, who built the wall originally? Was it the town or the property owner or previous property owner?
It was built by the property owners, not by the town. But then at one point, when the retaining wall was built, for some reason, I don't know exactly why, it encroaches into the public right away. So now, given that there is that encroachment, the town is responsible for replacing those elements.
Okay, and are we using the existing stone and just rebuild, like taking it apart and you know, fixing the you know, what's behind it, and then putting this, because it says it's dry stack stone, and I just wondered if it's the same stone that's there now.
Yeah, based on my understanding, the consultant indicates that they will try to use a stone material that mimics the appearance of the current retaining walls. The intent is try to resemble the existing retaining wall as much as possible.
Okay, so they're not going to use this stone in particular that's there now?
I believe.
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. I believe some of the retaining walls, some of the stones cannot be used due to its current condition. There may be some of them can be incorporated into the retaining wall, but my understanding is a lot of the portion of the retaining wall will be replaced.
Okay, because I wondered if the homeowner, if the property owner built it and the town, it's on town property, who actually owns the material? But I guess that should sort itself out. I guess whatever happens to it. Yep, go ahead.
So through Mr. Chair, I just want to quickly add that the property owner is aware of the issue. We've been in touch with the owner, and he agrees that the retaining walls be replaced. So we already have some discussion, communication with the owner.
Okay, and do we have a standard retaining wall, you know, sort of like a you know, like a standard design in the town for retaining walls? I know we have retaining walls on Yonge Street that are poured concrete, formed concrete. This is, you know, more special, obviously, because it's made of stone. But going forward, I know that the parking lot adjacent, there's a building next to this that has the same stone, and then the property adjacent to that, going towards Yonge Street, is the BMO parking lot, which uses, you know, a standard, you know, I don't know what manufacturer, but like a prefab concrete retaining wall material. And so does the town basically own all of these, because if they're in the right of way, and should there something be standardized? I mean, honestly, I'm glad John asked about the cost, because, you know, it is is public realm and it is the town's property, and I know that we have to ensure safety. But at the end of the day, you know, if this property gets a heritage wall, what's stopping any other property getting a heritage wall or whatever? I'm getting tired now, but I think you know where I'm going with this. I'm not opposed to a standardized format in terms of a retaining wall here, because I know the property next to this has the same stone, but it is not a designated property. It is, it looks like a sixplex or something built in the 70s. Yeah, and also too, just in terms of safety, does it require a railing around it? And you know, I just wondered if that's been considered, or that's something we're going to have to look at as well later down the road.
Sorry, through Mr. Chair, are you talking about safety during construction or like current?
No, like a railing. Like, it is a drop. It's probably about a 3.5, 4 foot drop there.
Based on my understanding, speaking with the operations department, I don't think there's any railings being proposed. But when they rebuild the retaining wall, of course, as you mentioned, Neil, it will be built to the town standards to ensure that it will be structurally sound, that it will be safe, that it will meet all the safety requirements.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Matt, I saw your hand up there.
So I just want to understand, so the plan is to remove the existing limestone wall, and we don't yet know what they're going to replace it with. As Neil said, it could be a poured concrete wall even. And I do understand, sorry, Carlson, I do understand that if it is brought up to today's standards, that a railing would be required because it's over the minimum or the maximum unprotected height. So if it's on city property, I believe the number, you may know, Carlson, is I think 18 inches, or it could be 21 inches above grade, requiring some sort of protective railing. So, and then another question, of course, that Neil brought up as well is number 26 next door, or is it 24? The rental building. What happens when we do the restoration of that, and then this one? What's to stop them from coming along and saying we want this one restored too? I mean, I know it's because this one's designated, but it kind of leaves that one looking not so good. So, and I think they should try and incorporate the limestone that's there into the rebuild of the wall. I mean, it'll be very expensive, but it's a, you know, to have that material just disappear would that's a lot of money right there.
So through Mr. Chair, I don't really have the information about the adjacent property, and also regarding its current condition, and also whether the retaining wall is actually located within the public right of way. So in this case, I can circle back with the operations departments, because they've been kind of managing this project. Unfortunately, I don't know a lot of history about this proposed work. And in terms of the railings, because it wasn't brought to my attention about any railing designs, I can't speak to the engineering standards for the retaining wall. Then again, this can also be, I can also circle back with the operations department and get that number for the Heritage Committee. Before we bring a final recommendation report to council, staff will ensure this information is provided to Heritage Committee for review and for final comments before we bring a report to council.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Carlson. Any other committee members have any questions or comments related to this matter? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, if there are no further comments, I'll call a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Just being aware of the time, we are approximately 10 minutes over what we had originally planned for. We do have a few more items on the agenda, including 2 from homeowners that I think we should try and address this evening. Does anybody have any concerns if we go a few more minutes over to try and get through the agenda this evening? Okay, perfect. Very much appreciated. Thank you. Moving to the next item, item number 6.2. Item number 6.2 is memorandum from planner re-heritage permit application file HPA-2021-04, 20 Spruce Street. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion? Okay, I'm seeing Neil as the mover and I'll take Matt as the seconder. Item 6.2, that the memorandum regarding heritage permit application file HPA-2021-04, 20 Spruce Street be received, and that the Heritage Advisory Committee comments regarding HPA-2021-04 be received and referred to staff for consideration and further action as appropriate. Would staff like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item relates to a heritage permit application, HPA 2021-04. The application is proposing to construct a single-story garage addition at the south side of the existing dwelling at 20 Spruce Street. Since this property is located within the Heritage District, the proposed work will require a heritage permit. Just want to quickly note that in the staff report, the attachment shows that the proposed garage has a side yard setback of 0.3 meters. Now, the town has been working with the applicants to try to increase that setback distance. The applicant has recently made the modifications to the plan, but the modification was done after the publishing of the report. So the latest version of the drawings actually shows a separate setback distance of 0.6 meters front, because 0.6 meters is the minimum distance that a building must provide as per the engineering standards for drainage reasons. Staff have reviewed the application, and we are satisfied that the elevation design and the overall appearance of the building meets the design guidelines in the Heritage District Plan. This is a relatively small structure. It's located at an inconspicuous corner of the building away from the streets. It will be subordinate to the main heritage building. And overall, staff think that the proposal will have minimum impact on the heritage streetscape appearance. And also just a note, the owner did speak to the property owner to the south, who will be affected most by this proposal, and the property owner to the south indicated that they have no objection to this proposal. And that concludes my introduction.
Thank you, Carlson. Does the committee have any questions or comments? And maybe a quick question for you, Carlson. Is this the application that came forward as a carport at our last meeting or 2 meetings ago? Has this been before us?
Correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
But the applicants decided to proceed with the garage addition instead. So this is the latest.
Full garage. Thank you. And Neil, I did see your hand up, so I will pass that over to you.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, to Carlson. There was a tree located where this garage addition will be. Did it not need to come for heritage tree removal permit to the committee? It was removed about a month ago. I went through, maybe a little bit longer, I don't know. I was walking with my dog through there, and there was a guy on a crane hanging from a wire sawing the tree branches off. So it was the one, right? There was one basically where this garage is going to go.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. My understanding is there was previously a tree at around the general location where the garage is being proposed. That tree didn't come to the Heritage Committee because that tree has already been reviewed by the Town's Parks Department, and it was determined that it was at a very poor condition. It's deceased, and that's why it got removed. And as per the tree bylaw, it doesn't have to go to the Heritage Committee if a property owner is removing a tree that's dying.
Okay, so there was another tree being removed at the same time. I'm assuming same issue. Okay. Okay, and I was going to speak about the setback, but I guess is the Committee of Adjustment going to make that determination about the? Okay, so we don't need to talk about that. I just want to add a comment that it's hard to assess how consistent or compatible this is when I don't have a picture of the house in the report. It took me a few minutes at least to try to understand the drawing that they submitted, because I was trying to figure out where there was a single story bungalow heritage building in like on that street, and then I realized that it was actually the side addition onto an existing side addition onto the heritage building that you described. You know, the 2-story buff brick, et cetera, et cetera. So I think in the future, it would be great to, in order to provide full context, whether this is compatible or not, to actually have a picture. And I guess that also, maybe we don't have one because we don't have a, you know, we don't have a you know, a designation specific for this property because of the blanket designation over the neighborhood. So not every property has its own story, so to speak. So that, take it for what it's worth. But I also feel the same way about when we speak about the streetscape, and it's hard to know the impact on the streetscape when I don't have, I mean, I can go on Google Street View, I guess, but I really don't have a fulsome picture of what that streetscape is, or at least what's immediately adjacent to it. But at the same time, I could determine that 0.3 or now 0.6 side setback seemed a bit, you know, maybe challenged how compatible it was going to be. Okay, and oh, there was something in the report, and I don't have it open. I can't scroll through it right now, but it did mention that it was under the stable neighborhood guidelines, and I don't think it is. I don't think that the heritage, I know the district has its own plan, however outdated it may be, but it's not considered a stable neighborhood. That was Southeast and Temperance and Aurora Heights and Regency Acres. So I think that.
So for you, Mr. Chair, are you, I'm looking at the report now. Do you remember which section you're referring to? I just want to make sure I.
No, I remember reading it, and I just jotted down a note on paper because I, you know, it's hard. It's easier to do it on paper than digitally. Yeah, I honestly.
Mr. Chair, because you're right. You know, you're absolutely right. This is not within the stable neighborhood area because we have different development standards and even zoning bylaw requirements for heritage, which is separate and different than the stable neighborhood. But I don't recall putting anything about stable neighborhood. I'm trying to find it. Perhaps, were you looking at a different report, Neil, by any chance?
No, it was, I have it noted for this one. It may have been the one on Catherine, but I do have it noted for this specific one.
Let me check out.
I can keep looking and just email you if you want.
Okay, yeah, if you can do that.
Yeah, I'll give it another look and I'll get back to you.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, and I just have one question for you, Carlson, through you, Mr. Chair. Is there going to be in the official plan review, is there going to be another review of the Heritage District Plan? Because it was brought up at council maybe last fall that the plan was developed, I think, in 2006 or thereabouts. And according to the Director of Planning, it was considered to be out of date. And so a lot of the things that we say are in the plan or that we say conform to the plan or however, whatever wording we use, if we're now considering our plan out of date, then I would suggest that we maybe in the review of the official plan, review how we're going to view the heritage plan. The Heritage District Plan, sorry. And that's just, again, another one for the suggestion box. And I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Carlson.
Yes, so I did hear discussion about the review of the Heritage District Plan, but I don't think we were ever given the actual directions in terms of the process. Well, I will touch base with the policy team and suggest this to the policy team for consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carlson. Any other comments or questions on this matter? Seen any, so I will call a vote. If there are no further comments, all in favor? Okay, any opposed? None, that carries. Thank you. Okay, moving to next item on our agenda, item 6.3. Item 6.3, memorandum from planner heritage permit application file HPA-2021-0263 Catherine Avenue. First, we will have a presentation by John Smale, the applicant, according to my notes. Linda, is John with us this evening?
Yes, he is. He's just joining the meeting now.
Perfect.
Just give it a second.
Hey, John, can you hear us okay? John, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have your matter for consideration among us right now, and we welcome you to the meeting. And you have 5 minutes. And we apologize. We've run a little bit late today, but we apologize for your patience, and we'll give you the floor for the next 5 minutes. Please proceed,
Okay,
John.
thank you for hearing us. I'm John Smale. My wife Debbie and I have lived at 63 Catherine since 1981. We are proposing to remove a small back hall with a 2-piece bathroom, which is not original to the house. We believe it was a porch that was closed in, and we're proposing to remove that and replace it with a roughly double the size addition, about 14 feet square roughly, which would give us basically a larger mudroom, replace a new 2-piece bathroom, and enable us to bring our laundry facilities up from the basement. It's at the back of the house. It's currently wood bevel siding. We would do the addition in the same style. It would be visible from the street, but it's well back from the street. And we do have shrubs and so on that I think screen it fairly well. And that's basically it. If you have any questions, please ask.
Thank you, John. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor this evening? Okay, we'll see that moved by Neil, seconded by Matt. And the item on the floor this evening is that memorandum regarding heritage permit application file HPA-2021-0263 Catherine Avenue be received, and that the Heritage Advisory Committee comments regarding HPA-2021-02 be received and referred to staff for consideration and further action as appropriate. So at this time, we can ask the staff for comments on this matter, and also direct any questions or comments to Mr. Smale this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a quick introduction. So this application, heritage permit application HPA-2021-02, is proposing to remove an existing rear addition, southeast corner of the building, and construct a new 1-story addition. So the addition will be approximately 16.41 square meters. There will be a small projection into the east side yard, the window facing the street. Staff have reviewed the application and have no concern with the proposed work. The addition proposed to be removed was constructed around 1980s, and it does not exhibit any significant architectural feature, and also was not part of the original building. The new addition being proposed at the corner is located well away from the street, and also the existing vegetation in the front yard will help provide screening. And we've looked at the dimension of the addition in terms of height and depth, and they all meet the standards in the Heritage District Plan. And the addition is generally subordinate to the main building, and the building materials being proposed is generally consistent with the ones suggested in the Heritage District Plan. So overall, staff have no objection to the approval of this application.
Thank you, Carlson. Does the committee have any questions for Carlson or for John this evening? I am not. Oh, please go ahead, Bob. And Bob, you're on mute. That's 2 strikes. You got 1 more this evening.
My apologies. Is this appropriate time for some comments, Mr. Chair?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. This is 63 Catherine. I live at 76, so I'm 3 doors east and across the road. I would just point out as way of comment, 61 and 59 Catherine, which are adjacent and second, first and second houses to the west of the applicant's house, both have similar additions that can be seen from the street. At 61 and 59, they're 2-story. This proposal is just 1-story. And as John has said, with vegetation somewhat blocking as well. The addition at 59 was done in the 1960s. The one at 61, I believe, is done within the last 10 years. To my recollection, it did not even come before the committee for a 2-story addition. I have no issues with what's being proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Any other questions or comments for staff or for John this evening? Okay. I'm not seeing any. So no further comments. I'll call a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, John. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving to the next item, 6.1. Agenda item 6.1, memorandum from planner re Canadian Achievements mural celebrating diversity and inclusion. May I have a mover and seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion? Moved by Neil, seconded by Matt. Thank you, Matt. Item 6.1, that the memorandum regarding the Canadian Achievements mural celebrating diversity and inclusion be received, and that the Heritage Advisory Committee comments regarding the Canadian Achievements mural celebrating diversity and inclusion be received and referred to staff for consideration and further action as appropriate. Would staff like to speak to this item? Go ahead, Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for this item, the town is planning to create a wall mural to celebrate the accomplishment of Canadians of various ethnicities and culture who have contributed to the building of Canada in Aurora. And one of the potential locations of the mural is the northern wall of the Lloyd building at 15242 Yonge Street, which is located at the southwest corner of Yonge and Wellington. This property was recently designated under the Heritage Acts. So staff would like to bring this matter to the committee for comments before we're moving forward. Now, staff have reviewed the destination bylaws and do not anticipate the mural will have any significant impact on the attributes. However, it should be reviewed by the Heritage Committee. We want to make sure that we get some comments before we move forward with this proposal. And it should be noted that the final location of the mural has not been approved by council yet. As my understanding, we're still in the process of selecting an artist for projects. The final plan still needs to be approved by council before it can proceed. So staff, I hope the committee can provide us with some comments on this matter. And today we have Phil Rose, who's the manager of this project, here today at the meeting to answer any questions the committee may have regarding the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlson. Does the committee have any questions or comments on this matter? Go ahead, Bob. Bob, are you looking to provide a comment? I see your hand up.
I am. I just had my view lower and couldn't find the unmute. Sorry. I will lower the hand, but I had a couple of comments. If the question is where I would personally, but we're asking the whole committee, I would personally go with the building that's at 15242 Yonge Street as my first choice, and 15105 Yonge Street as my second choice. I would not support the Hartwell Way intersection. I think this mural is something that we'd like people to see on an ongoing basis. So I think a more central location would be helpful. And I think putting something on the library wall might detract from whatever beautification is going to be happening to, I'm going to say, Library Square. What I was not clear about, Mr. Chair, so perhaps through you to Carlson, is are we being asked for content? I read in the report there's lots of clarification, information, restrictions, requirements for the artist, but I'm wondering, what about the content? Who decides when and how, and will there be input from the Heritage Committee on content, or just simply from the public? And is this a time to offer content, because they could rattle off a little bit? So I'll just wait to hear on that before I continue.
Through you, Mr. Chair, for this question, I think I'm going to defer it to Phil Rose, who's the project manager of this file, and I think he has a better knowledge of the process and the requirements.
Good evening, everyone, and through you, Mr. Chair. So the question I understand from Bob is who's going to determine the content for the mural. As you do know, the mural is going to be dedicated to diversity and inclusion. We are working with the anti-racism and anti-Black racism task force on this project. So we have a mural subcommittee that is comprised of 3 members of the task force, as well as the curator from the Aurora Cultural Center. And so we did do some public consultation. Can you hear me okay? Just checking in.
Yep. Phil, can you hear us?
Okay.
Yep, Phil, we can hear. I can hear you fine.
Okay, sorry, I was just getting a connection unstable message. My apologies, Mr. Chair. So we do have a subcommittee, as I mentioned, comprised of the task force, curator from the Cultural Center. We did some public engagement through the town's.
So any other committee members having Phil freeze? Yeah. So Phil, maybe try with your camera off. Maybe that might help.
How is that? Is that better, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay, where did I leave off? Where did you guys lose me?
Maybe like 5 seconds ago.
Okay. So I'll begin by saying that we had a public engagement through the town's website. We received a number of different recommendations for individuals as well as different holidays important for different cultural communities to be represented on the mural. We are going to be having another meeting with the subcommittee in the near future to figure out how to integrate those suggestions into the mural guidelines. Ultimately, the decision in terms of the final design goes to council, and we have a report that will end up to council with some of the designs that have been submitted by artists. That'll be in September of this year. At this point in time, we haven't envisioned a process to include the Heritage Committee's feedback, but I'm certainly welcome to any suggestions you may have.
Thank you, Phil. Does the committee have any questions or comments on this matter? Okay, I'm not. Yep, go ahead, Bob.
Here, I wonder if Phil could fill us in. just a little bit. I'm looking at page 2 of 3, page 10 of 346, page 13 of 349. The first bullet on the page celebrates the accomplishments of Canadians of various ethnicities and cultures who have contributed to the building of Canada and Aurora. Now, does that mean Canada and Aurora, or Canada or Aurora? And I would suggest that it would be quite a challenge, perhaps, to research the cultural background of Aurora citizens 100, 200 years ago.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to keep my camera off because I'm still having some connection issues.
Nope. Perfectly fine. Thanks, Phil.
So I heard a bit of what you said, Bob, but the question was Aurora, individuals from Canada's past and or Aurora's past. Originally, I think the motion that was put forward by Councillor Kim back in October of 2020, it was more of a resolution regarding individuals of national significance. As we were preparing the guidelines for the mural, we thought it would be great to uncover and unearth any individuals from Aurora that might have had from diverse ethnicities, diverse backgrounds that might have shaped the community, whether it was Aurora, whether it was York Region. So, we've looked at through conversations. I see Shauna's on here, the curator for the museum. We talked about the first school teacher, that Black school teacher that was in York Region, the school teacher from Cambridge. So I guess the question is, the answer is, we're looking at individuals with a national scope. We've had suggestions, for example, of individuals like Donovan Bailey. We've had individuals like the first Jewish Supreme Court judge. Her name eludes me at this point in time, who still sits on the Supreme Court of Canada. So those are kind of the individuals that have risen so far to the top of our understanding of who might be on the mural. But if there's anybody that you know of, or anybody else that you know of that has significance to Aurora's history specifically, we certainly would be interested in hearing about those people.
Thank you for that. I think I heard at the beginning that you would be working through Shauna White, curator of the town's museum, so that sounds quite positive. I might suggest that you, or perhaps through Shauna, connect with the former curator of the Aurora collection, Jackie Stewart. She has a wealth of knowledge of former Aurorans. Just to name one, for example, Lloyd Chadburn was a Royal Canadian Air Force fighter who lived in Aurora for a period of time, pilot of distinction during the Second World War, youngest squadron leader in the Air Force, killed in action in 1944 at the age of 24, went to school in town. But I don't know to what degree cultural significance is. Like if someone's Irish Canadian or Scottish Canadian, does that fit, and that kind of thing. But as long as you're going through Shauna and perhaps also Jackie, I'm happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Any other questions or comments this evening on this matter? Go ahead, Neil.
Just a quick question, either to most likely to Phil. Do you want suggestions tonight, or is there an online public survey or portal that we can go to submit these names?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to try this one more time to Neil. Neil, I would say if you have any suggestions tonight, certainly I would all ears. You know my email address as well, so if you want to email them to me. The public portion that was available through the town's website is now closed. So obviously email me directly, or with a little bit of context in terms of who they are and why you think they're significant. Or again, you can just let me know now, and I'll take notes as you're talking.
How far back do you want to go in terms of history? Posthumous
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. There is no, in terms of historical, yeah, they can be contemporary, they can still be living, they can be deceased. There really is no, as far as historical limits, we don't have any.
Okay, great, thanks. I'll be in touch.
Thanks, Neil. Any other questions or comments on this matter? Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, I'll call a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, that carries.
Thank you very much, and apologies for the technical difficulties.
Thanks, Phil. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, 7.1. So agenda item 7, informational items. 7.1 is a memorandum from planner re-heritage conditions, Shining Hill subdivision phase 2. May I have a mover and seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion? Thank you, Matt. As the mover, seconder, John. Thank you, John. So this item in front of us this evening is that the memorandum regarding heritage conditions, Shining Hill subdivision phase 2, be received for information. This is an informational item. Carlson, would you like to speak to the to this item this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item relates to the Shining Hill subdivision application. It's located on St. John Cider Road, just west of Yonge. So in June 2020, Council issued draft plan approval for the subdivision, subject to a number of conditions. And one of the conditions is to have the Heritage Advisory Committee evaluate the 2 dwellings and barn located at 370 and 488 St. John Cider Road. Now, these properties were not listed on the town's heritage register, and they were not designated. Now, when these conditions were imposed, unfortunately, this information was never communicated to the Heritage Division, and Heritage Division did not get the opportunity to reach out to the Heritage Committee to do a heritage evaluation. So in terms of the status of these properties, however, it should be noted that the barn at 488 St. John Cider Road was already demolished in January 2020, which was before Council imposed those conditions. For the dwelling at St. John Cider Road, town had already issued a demolition permit in May 2020 before Council condition. And given this was not a listed heritage property, building division could not withhold the demolition permit, and the building has been demolished. For the dwelling at 370 St. John Cider Road, town issued a demolition permit in July 2020 after Council imposed those conditions. However, as I mentioned, unfortunately, because when these conditions were imposed, it was not communicated to the Heritage Division. That's why we never had the opportunity to undertake a heritage evaluation with the Heritage Committee. However, I still would like to note that the applicants, before they made the submission, they actually hired Wayne Morgan, which was a heritage consultant, to undertake a heritage study to evaluate the value of those properties before submitting the application. Now, this was not a requirement because these properties are not listed on the town's heritage register, but the applicants made the retain a consultant to do those heritage evaluation anyway before submitting the application. And the heritage impact assessment concluded that these buildings did not have sufficient merits to warrant heritage designation. And the details of the heritage impact assessment is attached to the back of the information memo for the Heritage Committee's information. So staff would like to bring this matter to the committee's attention and for information. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlson. Does the committee have any questions or comments on this matter? Go ahead, Neil.
This was a beast in terms of getting through all this material and trying to understand what was going on and what to really pay attention to and what not to. I apologize. I know it's late, but I have some questions through you, Mr. Chair, to Carlson. I want to clarify, if a building is not on the heritage list, it can still be, can it still be recommended for designation? And I'll just use a quick example. Say a Nobel Prize winner lived in a house in 1980 and the house was built in 1963 by a famous mid-century architect. But it's not on the list because the list only goes to 1945. Can we say, hey, maybe we should designate this house? Is that something you can do, or does the existence of the list preclude any other criteria for designation?
Through Mr. Chair, my understanding of the Heritage Act is the property does not need to be on the list in order for council to designate it. However, just a note, if the property is not on the heritage list, then it would not be subject to demolition control, which means if the applicant submits a demolition permit, there's no legal mechanism for the town to withhold the demolition permit as long as they meet all the building requirements.
Okay, so council wanting to pursue this, I mean, it was within their right or their realm, or however we want to say that, their purview. So you just said that it kind of got lost in the mix. It never got forwarded to you as something for you to look into until recently, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and now I went through the whole thing, not word for word, but I went through Wayne Morgan's HIAs, and there were some landscapes involved there, but I didn't count those. I counted 11 buildings. Were those all in Aurora, or were some of them in Newmarket? Because, to be honest, I couldn't keep track of all the addresses, and some things were Newmarket, and they weren't always explained as Newmarket. So I counted 11 buildings. Does that sound about right?
Hold on, let me just quickly pull out the attachment. So sorry, through Mr. Chair, Neil, are you asking for like the total number of buildings on the subject property, the Shining Hill land?
Well, that was my next question. What is the subject property? Is it like all like 13 addresses, Yonge Street and St. John Side Road, or whatever number of that? Because there's no consistent in terms of the motion from council. When I looked at that, or the amended motion, pardon me, didn't specify an address. It just said subject land, but then all of the properties themselves are, in Wayne Morgan's report, are assessed in terms of specific addresses. I assumed. Now, at some point, I think you clarified for me that they were all on St. John Side Road. Is that correct? They were
correct. I
think you just said it. In fact, 370 and 488 or 4 something like 438.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so I've whittled it down to 3. So, of those 3, 2 of them were issued demolition permits prior to council. One of them being the barn, which was demolished, and now I have on good authority that was actually demolished in 2019, shortly after, not in January 2020, but in July 2019. Do you close a demolition permit the same way you close a building permit, or is it just expire after a year or whatever period?
My understanding is after the demolition permit is issued, there is a period where which requires the property owners to demolish the building in accordance with the demolition permit. And if they don't demolish the building within, I don't remember the exact time, but I believe it's a year. I can confirm with the building division. And after the building has been demolished, the town would do an inspection just to ensure that the building is demolished in accordance with plans. And then after that, the file will be officially closed.
Okay, so the town says January, but I have one of the local photographers actually filmed it in process being demolished in July 2019. So when it got to council, that amendment was sort of a moot point because there was no barn. Okay, now the third house, which you just described as 370 St. John Side Road, that permit was issued after the council motion, so that we missed the boat on that. Now I just want to add a follow-up to that. The fact that it was reviewed already and determined not to be of significance, council can very well has the right to go back and say, we want to review that again. Okay, fine, fair enough. Trying to plow through it. Okay. Now, of all those, out of everything there, I counted 11. So please just take my word for it. It might be 12, it might be 13, it might only be 8 or 10, but more than 3. Nothing else has been demolished since in those other buildings. Like there's nothing, because, and I'll tell you why, there is a report, the Beacon report, which is the environmental consultant report, found a nest in a building, in a structure, in June 2020, which was when this council motion was going on. And then when they went back, sometime between June 16th and June 25th, so the council meeting happened in there. They spotted a nest on the 16th, but when they returned on the 25th, that building was gone. And so do you have any idea what building that was? And was there a permit for a building that we've missed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that was for, because my apologies, because I'm not the project planner of the subdivision. So
I know, it's not your fault.
But so. I believe I read a correspondence before that an environmental impact study was done regarding the barn swallow observation. I'm trying to find that email to confirm the exact location of this property. But it may take a while, but I can, maybe it may be quicker if I circle back with the project planner.
Yeah, okay.
So that way I can get the confirmation from them for response.
Okay, because the report did specify, it just said structure. And so that means there's a 4th building that was demolished. And I didn't know if that was one of the buildings that council had specified, because it just said barn and 2 houses, and there's actually.
Sorry, through Mr. Chair, I just find the email. It's from, it's an email that was sent to me by our director. And in the email, it did mention that the EIS was done to the barn. So the swallow was identified in the as part of in the barn building. And then the EIS recommended that.
If this was Beaton, or was this the other,
It's a Geoprocess Research Associates. You know what, Neil? Let me circle back.
Yeah. Okay. Just yeah.
Information. Yeah.
Because Beaton says it was in 2020 they spotted the nest, but the barn was long gone a year prior to that.
Okay. Let me. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to round this up with one last humdinger of a question. Just kidding. It's not a humdinger. Just let me know when you're ready.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair. So there's a lot of people in town who are, upset about all the trees that have disappeared, specifically on this property, but along St. John Side Road. Would this have ever qualified for a heritage, what do you call it, a cultural heritage landscape? I don't know that part was ever assessed. There's like ponds and things like that that were assessed. But in terms of heritage landscapes, I guess it would be more public view. I don't know how that works, but.
So through the chair, given that this application was submitted, I believe back in 2017, there's a lot of history behind this application. I don't know if the assessment of a cultural heritage landscape ever applied to this property. Normally, my understanding is there are some certain criteria that needs to be met in order for us to designate a cultural heritage landscape. It has to have some kind of community or contextual value to the community. I don't know, this may be a potential candidate. This is something I need to circle back with the planners who've been managing the file, because this is a pretty, this application is a couple of years old and there has been a lot of developments in the past couple of years. So this is something that I will confirm with the planners and get back to the Heritage Committee members.
Okay, and do we have any heritage landscapes presently on the register? I mean, I know we're reviewing, but I haven't.
So through the chair, we don't have any formal heritage landscape. However, there are some properties that identify specific landscape features as an attribute. For example, the Pine Ridge property located at Bloomington and Young. So there is a trail along the back of the property that is specifically identified as a landscape protected. But then in terms of actual cultural heritage landscape that you can put on the heritage register, we don't have any at this point. This is a project that we're contemplating in the future. It's going to be one of the future projects that we'll work on in the future.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for clarifying that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm done.
Thank you, Neil. Does the committee have any other questions or comments on this matter? Go ahead, Bob.
Apologies for demolishing early without permission. Did we impose any penalties? Through you, Mr. Chair, to Carlson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, because these properties were not listed on the town's register, so the demolition of these buildings is not subject to heritage approval. The requirement to undertake a heritage evaluation was a condition that was imposed by Heritage Committee. But in terms of the Heritage Act, there's no provision that would allow us to fine or penalize the owner of the property.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Bob. Any other questions or comments this evening on this matter? Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, I'll call a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Sorry. I will move to adjourn the meeting. We have covered all of the items this evening in our marathon session. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting this evening? Matthew, may I have a second? Neil, I saw your hand. Thank you very much. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Carlson and staff. Thank you.